Hey Steelers Nation, this is Joe Rockey here with another episode of the Pittsburgh Steelers Syndicate. Probably the last and only one you'll get on a Sunday, but I am just so excited about what the Steelers did in the draft. In today's episode, I'm going to break down each of the first five picks because the two in the seventh round are what they are. I want to show what both my opinions are, the research I've done on these guys, and I also want to throw in one of the best analytical sites opinions on each of these players. That will be towards the end of the episode because I think that it shows just tremendously how much Khan won this draft. But I'm going to start with the players and then dive into the research on them, what they are, what my opinions are on them, which will include the part where Joey Porter Jr. comes up, because those who have watched us as well know that I was against the pick. And we will break it down as we get to there. But Joey Porter was not the first one picked. It was Broderick Jones. So Jones brings a lot of great things to the table, obviously. He played on a two-time national championship team, played in the second half of last year, of 2 years ago, and then obviously played in all of last year's as well. He has just so much tremendous upside. And when we look at him, he's the kind of person that is not unreasonable at all to say in the long term, you're going to build an offensive line around this guy for potentially a decade. He has all of the physical tools, the size. Where we see the weakness with him was with his footwork. And if you're watching the Georgia Bulldogs throughout the course of the season, particularly focusing on Broderick, obviously, you will see that his footwork improved from the middle of the season than it did in the SEC championship, and then it was even better in the national championship, and had even more improvement in the combine. Clearly, Broderick is being coached upon what the problem was and showed dramatic improvement with it. So when I look at this, we then go to the statistics. Less than 2% of a failure rate in terms of run blocking, 0 sacks allowed. This is a guy who was playing the best conference and then the 2 playoff games against the other 2 best teams in college football. Left tackle, person you go against, the blindside protector, 0 sacks. So one of the good times when 0 is the magical number. And, for everyone who's been hating on Dan Moore, the 7 sacks last season, the 7 sacks season before that, 0. I mean, you can't really fight that. That being said, is he going to beat out Dan Moore for the opening day starting spot? And if it is a true and open competition, which is really what is implied that's going to be happening with all of the Steelers off-signing, is that this offseason is the offseason competition, possibly the most in 4 years, under the last 4 years here. If it's a truly open competition, I believe it's a 50-50 toss-up. And the reason isn't because I don't think Broderick Jones is the long-term solution, nor do I think it was a bad pick. The bottom line is it's a rookie in one of the hardest positions to start, is left tackle. Daniel Moore stepped up and became better as the year went on last year. He still had 7 sacks, but he did improve from year to year. Do I think that he's a better prospect than Broderick Jones? No, that's why I don't believe he's the long-term future. And when we sit here at the start of the 2024 season, if Broderick Jones is not the starting left tackle, I believe something has gone seriously wrong. So I think there's a very good chance that if we treat this as a fair and honest competition, which sometimes does not happen with first-round picks, but if it is, I believe it's about a 50-50 shot between Jones or Moore being your starting left tackle on opening day. And the reason for that is that if you have any single weakness at the left tackle position, you get exploited. Because looking at what the Steelers did on their offensive line this year, the right side shored itself up last year. The left guard they rebought, and both of the 2 they bought were better than Dotson, who, on a side note, I'm amazed is still on the roster. I thought for sure he was going to get traded to grab someone else in the 4th round. But as we look at it, clearly the weak link, when you look from the outside at the Steelers' offensive line, is going to be the left tackle. Especially if you put glaring line, rookie left tackle out there. So do you want to start the season with Jones being potentially exposed? And really, training camp will show us if he will be or not. But that is my fear with starting a rookie left tackle, period, especially given the fact that Daniel Moore is, while he's not a top 10 player, he's not a bottom 10 left tackle either when you look at the league starters on aggregate. But again, cannot complain at all about Broderick Jones. He was my number 2 pick of realistically people getting in the draft and obviously bringing home with him. Absolutely fantastic. Now, I did a lot of discussion leading up to the draft and leading into the day 2 of the draft video about how we need to avoid Joey Porter Jr. And my entire reasoning and rationale for that is I was marred and still am marred by his downside risk. Watching the draft on ABC, every single one of his highlights was a penalty in the NFL. That's a fact. It's also a fact that he has some of the best traits in terms of height, speed. Well, straight line speed. He doesn't really have left to right speed, which is why he holds and does the physicality he does. In fact, he actually didn't do the shuffle or the 3-cone drill, which is what shows your agility at the combine. And that's a big reason he wasn't drafted in the first round when it's all said and done, plus the penaltyisms. But in terms of the body type, the physicality, and the size, he is reminiscent of Mel Blount, as I said and gave him credit for last week. The issue is the NFL doesn't want Mel Blount to play in it. So, obviously, the Steelers coaching staff and Mike Tomlin know all this entering into it. They see his tape. They're not stupid. They also see the fact that people playing Penn State last year didn't even throw at him 30 times. So when we look at this, that is a clear indicator that people were afraid to go at him because it wasn't going to be successful. Now, he has hands like Ike Taylor, so that's going to leave a lot to be desired as well for those who are hoping for turnovers. But when I look at him overall, I just compared him to the Hall of Famer and one of the 3 best corners in NFL history. That's his potential upside. And if we were in the 70s or the 80s, yes, all day yes. My fear with him is that the penalty machine, all we hear is automatic first down because of Joey Porter. And that sentence I have seen destroyed Steelers' hopes more than any other sentence that ever gets said during an NFL broadcast. That's what I'm afraid of. And yes, I'm living in my fears, as Tomlin says not to do. But the other thing that Joey Porter Jr. is bringing to the table that is so Tomlin is the fact that Tomlin has said repeatedly he would much rather have someone that he needs to rein in than someone he needs to push the aggressiveness out of. Joey Porter Jr. has no problem throwing aggressiveness on the table. He is the kind who will make the hit. He's just not going to be able to cover the left to rights, and the double moves are going to be a point of potential exposure for him. But he's also a rookie. So you don't enter into the league unless you're Deion Sanders taking the thing over by storm. So realistically speaking, do I think that Joey Porter is going to be one of the starting corners and getting significant playing time throughout the year? Yes. But that's also because there are so much of a need for cornerback in the current NFL. Does he beat out Wallace or Witherspoon? Both of which I believe are a 50-50. Because when Witherspoon is on, he has proven that he is an all-pro talent. He just hasn't done it here yet because he hasn't been healthy. And Wallace is an incredibly good baseline. There's nothing wrong with Wallace's game as our cornerback. So for Porter to say that I'm above the bar of Wallace from the starting point is a huge positive. So we'll see, like I said, as the year goes on, whether or not he's able to step up and do this. But it is something that needs to be recognized. Again, my fears are flags. Aside from that, I think that he has a potential great future. But the flags are also something that can make you a completely unusable player in the NFL. Mike Tomlin knows him more than virtually any other prospect, though. His Tomlin's son and Joey Porter Jr. have been friends forever. They went to high school together, and they're still boys. So when we look at this, there is an element of, is Tomlin just picking the people that he likes again? Or is it because he's picking people with vast knowledge? And where we get the criticism from is the players from Maryland who just did not work out, like McFarland. Well, the reality is that the whole goal of scouting is to get more information on people. Tomlin has had him literally has watched him when he was 16 years old try to cover Antonio Brown during camp. He's seen it. He saw what he could develop into. And this is one of the joys and the perks of having a longevity of a coach this long. You get this kind of intel and the relationships coming around. So I have said repeatedly, in Tomlin I trust. And the fears that I have are not unwarranted. But the confidence that I have in Tomlin to fix them also cannot be ignored. When we look at the second pick of the second round, Benton. Benton has basically a lot of upside. I think that when we look right now, if we're trying to set up the three-man interior front to stop the run, he is 100% one of the three, and Liao has gotten booted as a result of this signing. Again, Liao, I'm not really totally sure how he's going to fit into this mix, because as I get further along into the draft, Liao had a very bad day over this weekend. Not quite as bad as Swift from Detroit, but Liao, as a Steeler, might have had the worst day of any Steelers, the exception of maybe Dan Moore. And the reason is that Benton, without a doubt, is now one of their best three run stoppers out of the box, out of the University of Wisconsin. He's one of the three. And the question then becomes, when we go into nickel, which is now the base, but when we go into nickel, will Benton be able to be the starter or have more snaps overall than Ogunjobi? They profile incredibly similarly in terms of the production that we're going to get. Benton does give a little bit more of a pressure package than Ogunjobi, who again basically didn't give you much at all last year in that department, less than 10 pressures overall. So with Benton, at least you know there's a possibility of it growing and his bull rush taking over. Because you know that the second nickel defensive tackle will always be single covered. Because between Highsmith and TJ, your first priority of blocking the Pittsburgh Steelers starts on the outside. And then when you look at the inside, there's no brighter light than Cam Hayward. So he's going to have an opportunity, at least this year, if not for a prolonged period of time, to have single coverage to go through to win getting sacking opportunities. The question is, will he be able to do it? And that's a pure developmental and strength policy. And I think that he will. I really do think that when we look at this, that Benton is going to be one of these guys that is worth the pick. And I believe it's a no doubt he's worth the pick. NFL quality defensive tackles is one of the least provided position by the NCAA. They just don't make a lot of good interior quality linemen, and you have to take them. You have to swing the bat and try to get them, because if not, you're taking oversized defensive ends and trying to force them inside, which is essentially what happened with Liao. And Liao's caught in that in-between of, am I a middle guy? Am I an outside guy? What am I? I'm going to try both. And I'm not really sure the Steelers know what they're doing with him there. But that's why I think part of this is he's in trouble, because he's not going inside. He's not fast enough to be competing with Highsmith or Watt. So his spot on the roster really gets hurt here. We look at the third round pick, Darnell Washington from the University of Georgia. Darnell Washington is enhancing a trend that has become incredibly apparent with the Pittsburgh Steelers in this offseason and in shadows in the offseason before. The Steelers do not care if you're hurt. They trust their medical staff to get you back up to tape. Nate Hedberg was hurt last year. One of the middle linebackers we signed was last year. And then obviously Darnell Washington only falls to us in the third round because of his injury. A very strong argument can be made. He's a first round pick if he doesn't get hurt. And you got him in the third round. You're also in a position where he doesn't need to play this year. So at the end of the day, if he gets the Terrell Austin hangnail but IR'd the whole year, you basically are giving yourself a tremendous asset going into next year. If he can come out and be healthy right off the bat, you just enhanced what I believe was already your best position group on the team, and you took it to a next level. You can play football with 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, and run the ball like crazy. And basically play, we can win games with 14 points. We'll just never let your offense come on the field. Because Washington can block. I mean, this guy basically could be a tackle if he was just a little bit bigger. But he also has hands that are nothing to shy about. When we look at him, the medical is his biggest flaw. And that's temporary. The long-term asset that Washington brings to the table, in conjunction with Freiermuth, opens up so many more possibilities to this team that aren't even crazy. And yes, Gentry is a very, very good number 2 tight end. And Hayward is a very interesting H-back type who can also play tight end very good. But putting Washington on this team and getting him late in the 3rd round, 93rd overall, is an incredible long-term steal for this team. Similarly, I am in love with taking the second Badger that the Steelers took in Herbig. They already came out and said that the whole concept is the inside or outside. Where's he going? He's playing outside. That's what the Steelers firmly intend him to do. The Steelers really do not have a quality number 3 edge rusher. But behind Watt and Highsmith, there's no one. And heaven forbid one of the 2 of them get hurt. Because we saw what the record was when Watt went down. Highsmith played basically every snap last year. So giving him some reps couldn't hurt either. So Mitch Hedberg, nearly a sack per game, playing in the Big Ten, 2-year starter, living in the backfield, one of the best rates of tackles for a loss in all of the NCAA. But he only dropped because his arms are a little bit shorter, but it didn't stop his production. And he didn't quite have the measurables. He's from Wisconsin. What Wisconsin player has measurables except for J.J. Watt? I mean, T.J. Watt fell to us because his measurables weren't awesome, and that worked out pretty good. Hedberg, I'm not saying he's going to be Watt, but I am saying he trains with Watt, and T.J. vouched for him. This is an amazing man. We got him at 132, and this is a guy who potentially, even playing limited snaps, ideal world, no one gets hurt. He only comes on the field whenever Watt gives himself a blow. He still can give you 10 sacks a year as a rookie. That's how good of a rusher he is. He's one of the most underrated edge rushers of this draft, strictly based upon production. And again, it's not like he was doing this in the MAC. He was doing this in the second best conference in the NCAA in the Big Ten. And he was playing against the best team in the Big Ten because he did not play for Ohio State. So when we look at this, so much great potential from Hedberg, and all 5 of these picks, just absolute studs. In the 7th round, the Steelers went with Trice. The thing with Trice was, again, injured guy, not sure what we're getting, but there are some people that have him ranked as high as the 14th corner in this draft. The tremendous upside, smaller body, smaller frame, torn ACL, so basically didn't play last year. Played in 2 games, played through an injury, and it didn't look good. It just didn't. But this is what the 7th round is made for. You take a floater on a guy that, when healthy, would be a 3rd rounder, and if he connects, boom. And if not, he's another 7th rounder who didn't make the team. Not a big deal. And with Anderson, to be totally blunt, he's another left tackle. I didn't do a whole lot of research on him because he's now the 5th tackle on the team, and I highly doubt he makes the roster. I mean, that's just the simple fact. Between the fact that Moore, Jones, and Chooks are all on your team, we normally only keep 3 tackles, and we signed one from Tennessee earlier in the offseason. I mean, he seems like a nice guy, I'm sure, but I think it'd be very hard for him to make the roster. Now, I wanted to conclude this episode by going to what I believe the best analytical website is in Football Outsiders in their ranking of the draft picks. Because the way the Football Outsiders does, they don't just go by where they think people are going to be. They're going to be who is going to have the best NFL careers, period, top to bottom. When all said and done, here's the 100 that they believe in. So, in the order that the Steelers drafted them, Football Outsiders believes Broderick Jones will have the 35th best career of every single person in this draft. 35th, getting him at a 14, might be the only pick that they didn't give a value. But again, it's hard to give offensive linemen a whole lot of love, and you kind of see that overall in their rankings. Football Outsiders does not share my fear of Joey Porter's grabbiness ruining his career. They believe all said and done, of every single person in this draft, Joey Porter Jr. will have the 19th best career. And looking back at the way Porter conducted himself at the Combine, he's a great person, great interview. I think had he run the 3-cone and the shuffle drill, he would have gone in the first round. But when you just go off of his tape, it's a very scary thing to say that he doesn't quite have the lateral movement. And I think he ultimately hurt himself in that regards. But again, Football Outsider says Porter's going to have the 19th best career of every single person in this NFL draft. Benton, who we draft 49th overall. Football Outsiders has him saying he's going to have the 42nd best career. And again, getting the guy you think is going to have the 42nd best career at 49 overall, that's another win for Con. So when we look at this, this is dominating. You have already gotten your first 3 picks all in the top 50. That's amazing. That's what you want. But this is the real steal of the entire draft. Because again, Football Outsider is looking at the duration of what your career will be, not just your rookie season. And Darnell Washington, that we got at number 93, they believe is going to have the 18th best career out of every person in this draft. Little fear because the person they have ranked ahead of him is Myles Murphy, who the Bengals took. But when we look at this from the Steelers' perspective, to get a guy 93rd who should become number 18, amazing. And then we top this off with the final pick that we got in the 4th round. And then we top off Football Outsider's opinion of the draft with Nick Herbig, who the Steelers got at 132. Again, they have him rated as the 88th best person in terms of what their total career will be. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, when it's all said and done, have drafted 5 players, all within the top 90, which again, you shouldn't be able to do. 3 of them within the top 35. It is just an absolute steal for what these Steelers did. And we'll be going through later in the week, looking at how some other outside people have drafted and rated the Steelers draft class. I absolutely love it. Again, in my own personal bias, would I have flopped from taking Gonzalez and taking a tackle with the 2nd pick? Yes, of course. But looking at the way that it shook out, Porter's a wild card. Witherspoon's a wild card. So we look at their cornerback room right now. If Witherspoon's healthy, all pro level. If Joey Porter can get the grabbiness out of his game, all pro level. And if both of them fail, you have a very solid placeholder in Mike Wallace. When you go into a camp, knowing you have a Hall of Famer on that side, worst case scenario, above average on the other side, with 2 wild cards who could become all pro, it's about as good as you can be as a cornerback room entering into a season. And I just absolutely love what the Steelers are at. This is going to be competition up and down the roster. And I do believe that Tomlin is going to stick in the mode that the best player will play regardless of when we drafted you and where we drafted you. And I think that that mindset is going to create even more and more competition. I think it's probably the best thing we can do for all 5 of these players. Saying that, you know what, Herbig, if you can become better than Highsmith or Watt, the door's open for it. I don't see it realistically happening, but it's there. Porter, you have to prove it. We're not just giving you the starting corner spot. You have to beat out 2 NFL quality players right now. And Jones, you have to prove that you have no weaknesses in the game. That's the kind of competition that will make the Steelers better. Tomorrow's episode is going to be breaking down the rest of the AFC North and where I believe the new floor of the Pittsburgh Steelers is coming out of this weekend. So yeah, this episode was a little bit longer, but again, I was just so excited about the draft. I really wanted to focus on our first 5 players. I see no way that any of them don't make the team, and I see a very strong possibility that as long as Washington is healthy, all 5 of them can be getting a hat on week 1. So absolutely phenomenal draft. You could not say that for very many teams, that you think that all 5 of them are going to dress for week 1. And that is absolutely phenomenal. Khan has been killing it. And yes, this is the time of the year where everything is rosies and perfect because no one's hurt yet and we're all living our optimism. But I feel I've been trying to be pretty fair and straightforward with all the pros and weaknesses of everyone. All of that being said, this was an amazing draft. Steelers this year is going to be awesome. Again, tomorrow, where the worst case scenario the Steelers finish in the division is. And until then, here we go, Steelers. Here we go.